Good evening. Welcome to the December 6, 2017 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We have a quorum present, so I'll call the meeting to order. The first item on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes of October 18th, 2017 and November 1st, 2017 and November 8th, 2017. We had a lot of meetings last month. Are there any additions or corrections to any of those minutes that were turned in? I know you all read them completely because it's about the size of War and Peace, all the meetings that we had. If there's no...
Chairman Lamb?
Yes, sir?
There was one correction that we need to make.
Okay, thank you.
Staff. Sure. On the November 8th meeting, under the members present, Mr. Smotherman was inadvertently left off of that list, and so we would ask that you approve it with that amendment to the November 8th minutes.
He didn't participate in anything that night, so we...
I'm always so quiet.
We directed staff to leave him off.
Smotherman seconded the motion.
Well, most certainly, okay. If there's no other additions or corrections, I'll declare them approved as submitted. We have 6 public hearings scheduled this evening, first of which is an annexation plan of services and annexation petition for 1.7 acres located along Franklin Road, Veterans Commons. GP is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening to you and other members of the Planning Commission. Our first public hearing this evening is for you to consider a petition submitted to the Planning Department for annexation of one parcel. This property, the parcel itself, is 0.67 acres or thereabout. And then the study has also included 315 linear feet of Highway 96 right-of-way. So the total study area is 1.7 acres, including the public right-of-way. The property is currently owned by Veterans Commons GP, and they are the ones who have submitted the petition for annexation. There is a contract for Patels to purchase this property, and they are the applicants of the next item, which is the zoning change request. But as it's annexation, the annexation needs to be requested by the current property owners, and we received that. We have studied the property, included a plan of services in your packet. And in the plan of services, it does outline the services the city can provide and a time frame for providing those services. It appears that we can provide services within a reasonable time. Sewer is not currently available by the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department standard of available, which means contiguous with the property or within so many feet, as it's located across Veterans Parkway at Kroger. So to extend sewer to this property, it will be the developer's responsibility to bore under Veterans Parkway and extend it to the property. So it's something that can be done. It just doesn't meet the definition of available. And this property is within the Murfreesboro's urban growth boundary and contiguous with current city limits. And the next item, as I mentioned, would be for the request to change the zoning, but this is just to consider the petition for annexation and the plan of services. You should conduct a public hearing before formulating your recommendation to council.
Okay. Any questions for the staff before we open it? Okay, I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Before going further, let me remind everybody of our rules that we'll conduct our public hearings by. I'll open each public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Please come to the microphone, give your name and address if you would. Keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes. If you have questions, we'll make note of those questions, and the staff will try to answer your questions at the conclusion of the public hearing, and also make all your comments to the Planning Commission, not other members of the audience. So that being said, would anybody like to come forward and speak on this matter? Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Questions or comments from the Planning Commission? There are none. We're ready for a motion.
Make a motion we approve the annexation and plan of services.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. The next public hearing is a zoning application for approximately 0.67 acres located along Franklin Road to be zoned commercial fringe, simultaneous with annexation. Gautam and Jack Patel are the applicants. Ms. Green.
Thank you. This next item is for you to consider a companion zoning change request with the previous annexation request. And it is for property that's about 0.67 acres, so it's a very small parcel. It's located on the north side of Franklin Road or Highway 96, and it's just west of the intersection of Veterans Parkway. The property does consist of one lot with a single-family house on it. It's currently zoned RM in the county, and that stands for medium-density residential district. And the owners have petitioned for the city to zone this property CF, Commercial Fringe District, simultaneous with the annexation. This parcel is owned by the same group as the 4 contiguous parcels currently in the city. And the Patels have an application to purchase this parcel and those other 4 parcels, so all 5 parcels on the corner of this property. If you've taken some time to read my staff comments, you can see that staff was very concerned with zoning this small of a lot CF because I don't think it could demonstrate it meets minimum standards. And so as a way to assure staff that they don't want to do that piecemeal type development, they're committing to combining all 5 of these parcels into one lot of record. And if they were all one lot, then they would be large enough to accommodate our landscape standards, our parking standards, and any setback standards that we have. That redevelopment would also include removing any structures there. They've submitted a concept plan. I provided it to you. It is just that, just a concept plan. It doesn't have, it hasn't been reviewed by the city, but just showing their intent. And their intent is not to develop that one little lot all by itself. And I know we've looked at some other properties on 96 as maybe good examples of bad examples of what we don't want to continue to happen. So to show that they are serious about combining these lots, they have submitted a plat in this month's review cycle that you will consider for approving, where it will combine all 5 of these parcels into one. And they are okay with, and they have volunteered to record that plat prior to second reading at council if this zoning application makes it that far. So I wanted to tell you that because I did spend quite a bit of time in the staff report outlining some of my concerns. The future land use map I've provided for you does recommend that this area be developed as general commercial, and CF district can be consistent with that. And there are development types that would be there. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing, but you should conduct a public hearing prior to making a recommendation to council about the zoning change request.
Okay. Any questions? Thank you. I'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Nobody? Seeing nobody come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Questions or comments by the Planning Commission?
Mr. Chairman, if there are none, I'd make a motion that we approve the rezoning request to CF.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. Item C, zoning application to amend parcel F of the Victory Station PUD on approximately 12.1 acres located along Fortress Boulevard. Swanson Development LP is the applicant. Mr. Blomley, good evening, sir.
Good evening, Chairman Lamb, Planning Commission. Our next public hearing tonight is an amendment for the Victory Station PUD, parcel F of the Victory Station PUD to be exact. And there's a little bit of history that goes along with parcel F, so if you'll bear with me. Back in 2000, the original Victory Station PUD was approved, and it was approved for 176 multifamily residential units on this parcel F, which is the area in blue on the map before you. In 2015, Mr. Swanson came back to us with an amendment to allow an assisted living facility with 176 dwelling units on this property. There were some environmental concerns at that time. Rather than allow time for those environmental concerns to be addressed, the purchasers of that property decided that they would rather move forward and locate on the property to the south. So they actually had, they came back with a second application later on in 2015 to amend the PUD to allow the assisted living facility on the parcel to the south of the parcel that we're considering tonight. So Mr. Swanson has come back to us tonight and would like to regain some of the flexibility, or regain some flexibility on the parcel, knowing that the assisted living facility, which is all that the property is zoned for now, moved to the parcel to the south, He would like to allow it to be developed for what it was originally intended to be developed for, which is the multifamily residential use that it was zoned for in 2000. So this application looks to amend the plan development to expand the number of uses that are allowed right now to not only include the existing assisted living use, but to also include multifamily residential uses, including for rent apartments or for sale condominiums or townhomes. The applicant has submitted a pattern book, and that pattern book does not have a design that would be a concrete design as far as the site layout, because they have no buyer right now. So what they've done, they've submitted a conceptual site layout for how it could develop, but really what they're doing is they're trying to set the ground rules for design criteria for whether it's to develop as assisted living, condominiums, apartments. They would have to adhere to the design criteria in this pattern book. And a couple of points that I'd like to mention before Mr. Mulchan gets up and gives his PowerPoint presentation is that in an effort to mitigate negative impacts on the adjacent subdivisions to the north and to the west, they're proposing the following. They're committing to the buildings along the north and west property lines to be limited to 2 stories. They're committing to a type D buffer to be installed along the north and west property lines. A type D buffer, prior to our zoning ordinance amendments that took place several months ago, type C buffer would be what would be required between multifamily and single family. We ramped that up to type D buffer with our zoning ordinance amendment, since they're trying to be consistent with that type D requirement that would normally be required when we would have a multifamily zone next to a single family zone. And also, you'll recall at our day meeting on November 15th, the applicants, they conducted a neighborhood meeting on November the 14th, and one of the points that the neighbors brought up is that if it does develop as a multifamily use, condos or apartments, they'd like to see a privacy fence installed as well. And so the applicants amended their plan since that time to put that in as a requirement that if it does develop as one of the multifamily uses that's listed in the pattern book, that they do commit to installing that privacy fence, and that would be in addition to the type D buffer that would be installed. The 2035 land use plan actually recommends that this property develop as general commercial, which is along the lines of commercial highway zoning classification. The applicant actually makes the case in the pattern book that the multifamily and the assisted living uses proposed will actually make for a more appropriate transition to the adjacent single-family residential neighborhoods as opposed to the commercial uses recommended by the plan. But he can go over that reasoning in greater detail when he gets up and gives his PowerPoint presentation. As I mentioned, there was a neighborhood meeting on this that the applicant hosted on November 14th at the Blackman Community Center. After Mr. Mulchan gives his PowerPoint presentation, the Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing and then formulate a recommendation to the City Council. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from Mr. Blomley? Okay, Mr. Mulchan?
Evening, Chairman Lamb, members of the Planning Commission, Rob Mulchan, SEC. Here tonight, accompanied by Mr. Joe Swanson Jr., Swanson Development. We're here tonight to present to you our amendment for Parcel F in regards to amending the allowable uses that are already presented on this plan and more or less bring back the multifamily use that was originally approved with this parcel back in 2000. So I'll quickly kind of go through some slides on as you can see, the original plan back in 2000 on the left-hand side, the Parcel F is located, located in the upper quadrant of the overall Victory Station PUD. Is back then in 2000, it was originally approved as a multifamily with a more of like an apartment style design incorporated in the overall master plan. And in 2015, Mr. Swanson brought the property back to be rezoned for the assisted living, independent living care facility on that property up there. As you can see, the site exists today. You've got residential to your north and to your west. It's Trafalgar Squares to the west. And Parcel G, the Victory Point subdivision, is located to the north of the site itself. Across the street, you have Murfreesboro Missionary Baptist Church. You also have Parcel T, which you guys saw last year in regards to townhome development that Mr. Swanson and his client came through on that side. You also have the Cross Creek apartment complex to the northeast along Fortress Boulevard. And then to the south, the majority of that property is still large tracts aside from the assisted living facility built on Parcel E directly to the south along Fortress Boulevard. Zoning, as you can see, mainly PUD to the south, north, and east of the property. That's all associated with Victory Station. To the west and southwest is all residential single-family zoning classifications over there in regards to the existing subdivisions and the larger tracts that have not been developed at this time. Matthew talked about in regards to future land use. This is a more or less kind of a general commercial standpoint on that side in regards to the new character areas for the land use. That would be more indicative of a commercial type use for like big boxes, retail chains, and related services for enterprises, commercial stores, hotels. We feel that a better caveat from the land use character side of things would be looking more at the auto-urban multifamily character. So I feel that, this transition, whether it be utilized for multifamily residential or an assisted living facility based on the request that we have tonight, that would fit more in that kind of character. So we're actually kind of utilizing this as a bridging use between the existing single-family residential, the assisted living, and any of the other parcels that are part of this land use that are zoned as a general commercial at this time. So it would be an indicatively a good use for that transitional element between single-family lots and any high-intensity type uses on that side. Go through a few slides real quick in regards to some of the views of existing additions. This is looking from Fortress Boulevard back onto the site. This is more or less at the location where the main entrance would be off of for the development into the site off of Fortress. This is a view back from the property along the tree line along the Trafalgar Square subdivision area over there, looking back across the lands towards Fortress. This is a view of Lazarus Way. This is the road directly to the north of the site. That's, like I said, is part of Victory Point subdivision and Parcel G. This is a view down Garcia Boulevard and Trafalgar Square. This is the road immediately adjacent to the west side of our subdivision. These are the homes on the right-hand side are the ones that back up to the property. This is the church across the street on Fortress. This is a view of the assisted living facility on Parcel E to the south. As you can see, the under construction currently moving forward towards closing here relatively soon. And also the apartments I noted earlier in regards to the northeast side of the development. Kind of zooming in a little bit in regards to the previous plans. Like I said, the 2000 was more of a apartment style development, and then in 2015 moving into the overall overall unified building for the assisted living, independent living facility on that property over there. And moving forward to today's request, this is, as Matthew spoke to, we've put together a more or less a conceptual plan in regards to if this did develop as a multifamily apartment complex, just to kind of give a sense of the overall design parameter of what the lot would look like if an apartment complex possibly came through, and to kind of outlay some of the ideas on this. Again, it's the same with the original PUD zoning. We're looking at continuing the 176 units. We have not gone up or down in regards to this parcel since the inception in 2000 on that, so the dwelling units are still the same. Looking at roughly about a little more than 15 dwelling units per acre on this. These units will be for sale or for rent, depending upon whether this is a multifamily side of things or if it's independent living or assisted living. They'll be part of that overall package for the facility itself. Any vehicular areas within the development itself will be private, so probably maintained, and all utilities will be underground as well. Talk a little bit about the buildings, and then you kind of have to break this up into two pieces from the standpoint of this being multifamily or the independent living side of things. On the multifamily, as Matthew talked about, we're looking at 2 or 3 story buildings. If you look back at the plan really quick, the homes themselves, the units that are along the western or northern side of those 4 units that are along those boundaries would only be 2 stories in height. That would help match the overall height character of the residential homes in the subdivisions to those along those boundary sides are there. As the internal structures, the other 5 units that are on that plan there would be more or less allowed to be generated up to 3 stories or 45 feet in maximum height on those. We're talking in regards to just the multifamily standpoint, the assisted living and independent living will have their own criteria for room sizes or unit sizes on those. But from the standpoint of looking at it from a multifamily residential standpoint, we're looking at a minimum 640-foot sized units on the development of those buildings. And again, these would be a mixture of 1, 2, or 3 bedroom type units if they were a multifamily component. Again, looking at trying to make this make these apartments as aesthetically pleasing in regards to the overall character of the Victory Station development, but also in regards to our neighbors. Looking at a lot of articulated edges, facades on this, articulated roof pitches and such, just to kind of help make it feel broken up and not one elongated building structure on that. All buildings will have eaves. The architectural accents will be, as you can see in this diagram there, there's a good accent as an access entry feature to the building itself. Building materials, whether it be the independent living or a multifamily type use, you'd be looking at primarily a cementatious fiber cement board with, that can be used in a shake style or just a regular siding panel, but also brick and stone veneers, and also the use of standing seam metal roofs as accent roofs for like the entryways and other pieces of the units themselves. And vinyl would only be permitted in the trim and soffit areas of any structure that's built on the property. As Matthew talked about, we've got a numerous couple of setbacks. We're looking at a 30-foot front setback along Fortress Boulevard, a 20-foot setback along what I'll talk about here in a little bit is a proposed roadway along the southern portion of this that we'll talk about in regards to access and as part of this project on that side. And then along the residential portions, the northern and western boundaries, looking at a 30-foot building setback along there. So that's an increase of 5 and 10 foot in regards to how you look at it from either being a side or a rear setback standpoint on that. So bumping this up to a 30-foot building setback on that. And then part of that overall 30-foot building setback we're looking at is the 20-foot wide Type D landscape buffer to be incorporated with this. So you're looking at different materials such as magnolias, green giant arborvitaes, cryptomeria cedar trees. And then as Matthew talked about, as part of what came out of our neighborhood meeting was to help work with the contingency of this being a multifamily type unit development, whether rented or condos or anything like that. We're going to incorporate a 6-foot tall PVC privacy fence if this would develop as a multifamily type development on that side to help kind of more or less give that extra layer of privacy besides the 20-foot landscape buffer that's out there. Kind of want to speak a little about that. Back in 2000, when the plan was originally approved as part of the original Victory Station booklet that came out with that, Mr. Swanson went in and actually put in a Type D buffer back then. It is now since grown, so there are some places where it is thinned out and such like that. So we'll be going back when we get in, whenever we get to that design stage for this development, we'll go back in and do an analysis of what's out there and make certain we supplement back in to fill that buffer back up to the requirement of the Type D buffer. Amenities, again, kind of have to break this out into 2 different pieces. If this did, evolve as a multifamily type development, you'd be looking at, a clubhouse or a pool to go along with that apartment or condo complex, and then also looking at incorporating a pet park as well for those renters or buyers that have a pet that they want to take for a little stroll in the development. And then again, if this does evolve out as a independent or assisted living type facility, there'll be numerous types of things that they incorporate into this, typically usually like a cafe, a library, incorporating a pet park with this, but also some walking trails for those who can get out and about in regards to those being under care at the facility. Access, we have one main access point. As you can see here, we're looking at this main access will be in conjunction or across the street from the access to the Victory Villas subdivision or parcel T that came through last year. So we'll be lining our driveway for our development up with that development's driveway across Fortress on that side. And then the last part to this is the staff came back and made a recommendation. They were looking at incorporating some extra connectivity to the parcels, the undeveloped parcels to the south and west of this, coming through and putting in a 40-foot right-of-way to incorporate a new city street that would allow connectivity back to these undeveloped lands. But also, more importantly, those will be developed as two pieces. As you can see here in the drawing, the reddish or pinkish colored area that comes off of Fortress back to that first entrance will be responsibility of the developer of the land, parcel F, to put in that segment of roadway for a secondary access point from a health, safety, welfare standpoint to get into that development. At that point in time, the remainder of the blue portion that will be land, the roadway will be developed by the adjacent property owner that comes along and develops the parcel to the south and west of this of parcel F. I appreciate your time and consideration of this, and I'm open for any questions now or after the public hearing. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Mulchan?
Chairman Lim, I did want to mention that Mr. Mulchan, one of the last things he mentioned was about that roadway, and when we knew that Mr. Swanson was going to need to come back to amend that when his previous client moved to the parcel to the south, we expressed to Mr. Swanson the need for that connectivity back to those undeveloped parcels to the west. There's a lot of acreage back there. I think there are 3 large parcels with frontage on Franklin Road, and to be able to have that east-west connectivity back to Fortress Boulevard for good distribution of traffic, we felt was very important, and so we asked Mr. Swanson to incorporate that into his plan, and he was willing to accommodate that request. But we feel that's a very key component of this plan.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mulchan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. If there's no questions, we'll open the public hearing. Ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak.
My name's Alan Wayne Scott. I live at 4260 Garcia, which is the west side of that property that they're talking about. I'm glad to hear that they're going to put the fence. That was one of our major concerns as a homeowner. We were concerned about the activity that would go on in the apartment complex with us being less than 30 feet away from it as far as access to our single dwelling properties. And we're looking forward to them paying attention to that. So that's a positive on our part at this point. We didn't know that until I came today. I am concerned about the construction process. They've been doing this contract building of the dwelling that is north of, actually I guess the south of that, which is the assisted living. And there's a lot of limestone rock into that area, and we're having some problems with them pounding and busting the rock. It's affecting our house. We've already had some issues, structural issues inside our property because we're so close to it, and we don't know if there's another way. Now, I will tell you this, that I work for Thompson Machinery, which is the Caterpillar dealer, and I do understand machinery and excavation and things of that nature. So I realize the area is conducive of that property, that type of rock and that type of structures issues to get it out. But it does affect existing properties, and our home is being affected by it. We've already spent about $3,500 in refixing drywall within our house from that building process. We're concerned about the number of hours that they're working. They're working Monday through Mondays, Saturdays, Sundays, 7, 8 o'clock at night. As a matter of fact, the contractors in that area, they'll have equipment and things delivered at 2, 3, or 4 o'clock in the morning. And it's just the activity needs to be controlled better. I realize we're not going to be able to stop progress and not looking to do that. But when you add another, if you look at the dwellings and you just take that times 2 vehicles per dwelling section, probably another 350 cars or automobiles that's going to be accessing that area. All hours of the day and night. So it's concerning that I'll be no further away from the chairman than here, my backyard, with that access and that going on. So it is a concern of us, and I speak for several of the homeowners that are in that area. There's another one here that would like to speak also, but we do have a strong concern about the construction and the quality of what's going to finish up there. I realize it has not been sold yet, So we really are in the dark as to what's going to actually go into that property. And obviously, a condominium section would probably be more advantageous than an apartment complex, because you would have long-term people buying and staying rather than moving in and out as an apartment complex would. I know our mayor is talking seriously about the controls that we read now of the police departments trying to watch the drug activity in these apartment complexes, and we just don't want to bring it into our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else?
My name is Rod Rogers. I live at 407 Carmel Drive in the Victory Point neighborhood. I guess I should say thank you, members of the commission. I'm not sure the appropriate way to address you. I guess you should be set up here. Please start by. Anyway, I ask you to not approve this zoning change. Approval of the zoning for the assisted living center that is currently under construction, and also keeping this parcel as multi-family units effectively increases the density in the area. The zoning that was approved the zoning that was approved several years ago for the Victory Station Master Plan, I'm sure, had many reasons for its design. There is a continuing effort to bit by bit change that original design. I would ask that you do a complete review of the Victory Station Master Plan before moving forward with any further zoning changes in this area. Congested streets and horrible traffic patterns are not inevitable. Well thought out community design and planning requiring street infrastructure to be built for the future and not just for what is needed now can have excellent results, even after an area is totally built out. But it requires better than usual planning. You have the opportunity to plan for a beautiful Murfreesboro in the future, not just this area, but the whole city. Or we can continue doing things as usual, which seem to be ad hoc as needed by developers. The decisions you make here are permanent results on the people living in the city and in the areas you make decisions for. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Nobody? Okay. And I'll close the public hearing. I don't know if this would be staff or Mr. Molchan to address the first speaker's concerns about the construction effect on the properties with the drilling of the limestone and all of that, the delivery of materials and all the hours.
Yeah, Mr. Molchan and Mr. Taylor might want to address that, and also Mr. Swanson may want to address after-hours deliveries, things of that nature for the assisted living facility. We do have, the city does have construction work activity hours. I don't know if deliveries would fall into that or not, but Mr. Swanson may want to address the activity that's occurring at the site to the south.
Chairman Lamb, Commission, staff, Joe Swanson, 1188 Park Avenue. I will look into this with the police chief. I was unaware that these deliveries were going on, and they may be sporadic, but I will guarantee you that I will address it and see what I can do to resolve those issues. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Now, Mr. Blomley, this was in the 2000 master plan. This was originally designed for multifamily, was it not?
Yes, sir. From when it was approved in 2000 until Mr. Swanson brought back the amendment in 2015, it was zoned for multifamily residential uses. So he's kind of looking to take what was in the 2000 plan and marry it with the 2015 plan so that both multifamily uses, which were allowed from 2000 to 2015, as well as the assisted living use, which is currently permitted on the property, would both be allowed to allow additional flexibility in how that property may be used.
So he's basically wanting to go back to what it was before it was rezoned for the assisted living plan, but he's added in other parameters such as the additional setbacks, the height limitations on the buildings on the north and the west side, and also the access road along the south border.
That's correct. The controls in this book would govern any development on this property, whether it would be multifamily or assisted living.
When he does get a contract on this property, of course, we don't know if it's going to be for multifamily or for fee simple townhomes. It'll still have to come back up before this body for site plan approval, will it not?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Any other questions for staff or for the applicant? Mr. Smotherman.
The stub street that we show there, would it not be advantageous to us to go ahead and, in a presentation, show a sidewalk that follows that roadway down through there, or would that be something that would not be needed until site plan?
Well, on the section that would be constructed with parcel F, and thank you, Ms. Green. As she's pulling this up, it'll remind me of how they have it color coded. Yeah, thank you. The area in front, which is in red or pink, is what would be constructed with parcel F, and that would grant the secondary access that we like to see into whatever develops on parcel F. And then when the property to the west develops, they would be required to build what's in the blue, to build the extension of that blue. And just as a matter of general course, we do require sidewalks on both sides of all streets. So, both when the eastern segment comes in and when the western segment comes in, we would require sidewalks on both sides of the street.
Okay. We're just not showing it right now. Because right now, I mean, their sidewalks appear to be tan to me in the pictures that are on the property, and then, of course, obviously, the sidewalks are white, I guess.
Yeah, and while it would be a matter of course that we would require them, we can certainly have them include that in the book for clarity.
Yeah, I would think that we'd at least want to extend it up to where it would reach their first sidewalk on their property, which is kind of where the break point is for the parcel F development.
Yes, sir. I think that would not be an issue for Mr. Mulchan to revise that book before council to show that.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. Any other questions? If there's no other questions, we're ready for a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Item D, the zoning application for approximately 8.46 acres located along Manson Pike and Brinkley Road to be rezoned from commercial local to commercial fringe. Sharad Patel is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. Subject property has frontage on Manson and Brinkley, but it's not quite on the corner. There's actually a parcel on the corner adjacent to this parcel where there's an existing convenience market with gas pumps and a little multi-tenant retail center. This is on the southwest corner of Manson and Brinkley. This property has one single-family residence on it. It was annexed into the city and zoned CL back in 2006. It was zoned CL because it was zoned commercial in the county, and when property is zoned commercial in the county without a companion zoning request, it comes in with an interim zoning classification of CL, commercial local. The applicants are requesting to rezone the property to CF, commercial fringe. Commercial local, and I don't want to let Ms. Green get on a tangent because she's not a fan of the commercial local zone. Commercial local is kind of an outdated zoning classification, and one that for new zoning requests, we really don't see people make that as a zoning request. And so when we met with the applicant and he was looking at his options for the property and looking at what possible zoning classifications might be better suited to the property, we suggested that commercial fringe might be a more appropriate zoning classification. Commercial fringe is kind of, since it was adopted some 15, 20 years ago, it's kind of taken the place of commercial local as a transitional zone between single-family residential areas and more intense commercial areas, or as a transitional zone just in general adjacent to residential areas. The applicants agreed that the commercial fringe would be a good direction to pursue. Some of the differences between commercial local and commercial fringe are that commercial fringe in and of itself has additional protections for adjacent residential zones, such as increased side and rear setbacks over what the commercial local zone might have, as well as additional separation requirements for dumpsters, gasoline pumps, and drive-up windows for fast food restaurants. The CL zone also allows various residential uses, such as single-family residential, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. And while the CF zone does not allow residential uses, but it does allow commercial uses such as department stores, discount stores, that would not be permitted in the commercial local zone. So it allows a broader list of commercial uses than the commercial local zone does, but within reason, because it doesn't allow the heavier commercial uses such as contractor storage, motor vehicle sales, motor vehicle repair, and in general, a lot of things that would have some type of outdoor storage component. The future land use map actually recommends that this property, that this corner, develop as general commercial, which is actually more in line with the commercial highway zone. So the commercial fringe is actually a little bit lighter than what the 2035 land use plan recommends. However, while the text of the comprehensive plan does not specifically list the CF zone as being consistent with the general commercial character, it's staff's opinion that the type of development that the CF zone would enable would be consistent with what the 2035 plan recommends. The adjacent land uses directly to the south and to the east is the Blackman Station PUD, or PRD. So the map in front of you is actually incorrect. To the south and to the west is actually zone PRD for single-family residential uses, both detached and attached. As I mentioned, right there on the corner is the gas station. Across Brinkley Road is CF zone property where the Dollar General is developed, as well as some undeveloped CF zoned lots. And where you see Calcutta Drive and Calypso Drive, that's a townhome development that Old South had approved, but they have not moved forward with construction. And further to the south, zone CF, is the Pack Rat self-storage facility. So the applicants have requested this commercial fringe zone for this property. As I mentioned, it's already zoned commercial in the commercial local zone, but the commercial fringe zone is a little bit different and potentially more appropriate for this corner. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I believe the applicants are available if you have any questions for them, as well as Mr. Clyde Roundtree representing the applicants.
Okay. Any questions by the Planning Commission? Okay, if not, I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Nobody? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Once again, the Planning Commission have any questions?
If not, Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Item E, zoning application for approximately 4.8 acres located along Burton Knob Road and Veterans Parkway to be rezoned from RS-15 to Commercial Highway. Prashant Patel is the applicant. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. The subject property is located at the southeast corner of Veterans Parkway and Burton Knob Road. Planning Commission actually conducted a public hearing on this same request 3 months ago to the day. The applicants were requesting a rezoning from interim RS-15 to CH. This property was given an interim RS-15 zoning classification as it was annexed at the same time as the West Park property, but there was no companion zoning request at that time. The property is a little bit under 4 acres, and there is a single-family residence on the property. The applicants are requesting a rezoning to Commercial Highway. Back on September the 6th, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing and recommended approval of the request to the City Council. On it was either November 2nd or November 9th, the City Council conducted a public hearing and was uncomfortable with some of the uses that the applicant did not want to restrict on the property. You'll recall that the property to the south, which is the Horde and McCullough property, there were restrictive covenants that were placed on the property to the south, and there was a list of about 30 or 35 uses that the Hordes and the McCulloughs agreed to restrict from that property. There were about 4 uses from that list that the applicant did not wish to restrict at that time. I believe they were laundromats, beer and tobacco stores, packaged beer stores, and liquor stores. The City Council decided to vote to deny the application because those uses were not proposed to be prohibited, and because of the city wanting to protect the investment that it's making in the West Park property to the which is to the east of the subject property. So after the City Council public hearing, the applicant contacted me the next day and asked what his next steps were, and he said that he was willing to restrict the 4 uses that he was not willing to restrict at the time of the City Council public hearing. And based upon that, staff agreed to waive the 18-month waiting period because it seemed as if that was the main concern of City Council was with regard to the uses that the applicant was not willing to restrict at that time. In your agenda materials, you'll see the revised list of prohibited uses that the applicant has proposed. It does include the 4 uses that I mentioned before, in addition to all the other uses that the Hordes and the McCulloughs agreed to restrict from the property. So the list of uses basically is identical to the list of uses that the Hordes and the McCulloughs restricted on their property. One other change that you'll notice, there was some confusion at the City Council public hearing because of the way that staff had done the map. And staff got together afterwards, looked at the way that we were making the maps, and decided that it's best because, right-of-way for mapping purposes is zoned a certain way, but it just confuses the issue when, for example, all of the right-of-way in front of the subject property, as well as the little appendage of Burton Knob Road sticking out, was shown as being included in the request. So we thought, for the sake of clarity, from now on, when we get a zoning request, we're not going to include the right-of-way on the map, so that as that seemed to add some confusion. So you'll see on the map before you that it's just the parcel that's been requested, and we hope that adds some clarity to this request and future requests. So with that being said, Mr. Patel is in the audience. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any of him, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any of me, either before or after the public hearing.
Okay. Any questions for staff or for the applicant? Okay. I'll open the public hearing, ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
If there are none, I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Item F is a mandatory referral to consider the abandonment of a road usage easement located west of South Church Street. Matt Taylor is the applicant. Mr. Plumley.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. This is, we've had quite a bit of discussion about this road usage easement over the year, or over the last month or so. And we don't often see mandatory referrals for road usage easements, because I don't think I've ever seen a road usage easement before a couple days ago. This is an easement that was actually recorded in 1972, and it's in the orange color on the map before you. It stretches from the frontage road of South Church Street just to the north of the Knights Inn, and it crosses 4 parcels of the South Point Business Campus subdivision. South Point Business Campus was recorded around 2007, so 4 lots in the South Point Business Campus subdivision are encumbered by this easement. And the pie-shaped lot that's at the southern end of Business Campus Drive, back in October, I believe, you reviewed a site plan for that lot, and this road usage easement actually crosses their back parking lot, and it's an auto repair business, and they have their storage area in the back that's fenced in, and so doesn't exactly jibe with the purpose of this easement, and the purpose being for the construction of a future public street. Well, I think we can all safely say that with the recording of and development of the South Point Business Campus subdivision, the chances of this ever being, of a public street ever being constructed on this road usage easement is pretty slim. But after consulting with Mr. Ives, because that deed that was recorded in 1972 may have set up the expectation with some of the surrounding property owners that this would at some point be a public street and a public right-of-way, we thought it was best to treat it as if it were a public right-of-way as far as the process goes, and give folks an opportunity, if they felt they had some type of access right to that easement, to go ahead and speak now or forever hold your peace, so to speak, and have an opportunity to have their voice heard here. And so we need to conduct a public hearing on the abandonment of the city's interest in this road usage easement, essentially declaring that it will not be recorded as public right-of-way in the future and developed with a public street. And then after the public hearing, formulate a recommendation to the city council as a mandatory referral. And if the city council approves it, then the city would quitclaim its interest in this easement. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Taylor's here as representing his client, if you have any questions of him.
This was way out in the country in 1972.
I can imagine.
I drove back. I'd been overseas for 2.5 years and drove back on I-24 and got off there, and hadn't been to Murfreesboro in 2.5 years. Lived here all my life and got off the interstate there and didn't know where I was. Because the interstate wasn't there when I left in '69. So it was way out in the country. So
it was a blank slate back then.
Really? So, okay. Any questions or comments before we open the public hearing?
I would say if there's a stampede towards the microphone on this, we can blame David Ives, though. Because
Let's blame David Ives anyway.
there you go.
Okay. I'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak. Seeing no one come forward as expected, I'll close the public hearing. We're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chair, make a motion for approval.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. That concludes the public hearing portion of our agenda tonight. Staff reports and other business. Mr. Whitaker.
I have one thing to remind our citizens. Margaret Ann's over there grinning. Y'all know where I'm going with this. We've done our second mail out for our census, so I think we got 35% on the first mail-out return. So if you got a card, pitched it in the trash, please fill out the next one, turn it in. We think this is in excess of $2 million to us as far as our part of the tax from the state. So please fill out the census card, and we're going to do one more after this, and then we'll send the fire department out door to door. So this is very important to us. Thank you. That's it.
If there's no further business, we stand adjourned.